Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to explore a journey that every human soul must eventually walk, the 7 stages of awakening. As the great philosopher Alan Watts often reminded us, life is not about reaching a final destination, but about realizing who we are beyond the masks, roles, and illusions society has placed upon us. Awakening is not a single event, it is a process of peeling back the layers of conditioning until the truth of existence reveals itself. The first stage begins with questioning. This is when we start to see that much of what we have been taught about success, identity, even happiness, is built on collective illusions. We begin to ask, who am I really? What is the purpose of all this striving? This questioning is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. It is the crack in the shell through which light enters. The second stage is disillusionment. Here we feel the weight of society's expectations slipping away, and yet we feel lost. We realize that the old systems of meaning no longer satisfy us. Many people resist this stage, but in truth, it is the soil where new wisdom will take root. The third stage is self-reflection. Instead of chasing answers in the external world, we begin to turn inward. Through meditation, solitude, or quiet contemplation, we start to see the patterns of our own mind. We notice our fears, attachments, and desires, and we learn that we are not controlled by them, we are the observer of them. The fourth stage is surrender. At this point, awakening demands that we let go of control. We stop trying to force life into a rigid design, and instead allow it to flow. As Alan Watts beautifully expressed, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop. This surrender is not weakness, it is liberation. The fifth stage is unity. Here we begin to sense that we are not separate individuals struggling against the universe. Instead, we are part of a vast interconnected whole. The trees, the rivers, the stars, and our very breath are one movement. With this awareness, compassion naturally arises, because hurting another would be like hurting oneself. The sixth stage is freedom from fear. When you realize you are life itself, death loses its grip. Fear dissolves because you no longer identify with the temporary form, but with the eternal presence behind it. This stage is where peace becomes your natural state. Finally, the seventh stage is embodiment. Awakening is not about escaping the world, it is about living fully in it, but from a higher awareness. You return to daily life, but now with clarity, kindness, and deep joy. You work, you love, you create, but everything is infused with a sense of sacredness. Ladies and gentlemen, the 7 stages of awakening are not reserved for monks or philosophers. They are the destiny of every human being. We may walk them at different speeds, through different experiences, but the path is universal. As we grow, fall, learn, and rise again, we inch closer to the truth that Alan Watts so often reminded us of, that the self and the universe are one dance, inseparable and eternal. Awakening begins with questioning the illusions of society. True growth happens through inner silence and self-observation. Awakening unfolds in stages, not as a single event. Real freedom is realizing that you and life are not separate. Ladies and gentlemen, awakening does not begin with meditation, rituals, or distant spiritual practices. It begins with the simplest yet most profound act of questioning. From the time we are children, we inherit a world of ideas. We are told what is right and what is wrong, what is valuable and what is worthless, what success looks like and what failure means. Slowly, without realizing it, we build our identity around these borrowed definitions. We think we are the roles we play, the student, the worker, the parent, the citizen. But one day, often in an unexpected moment, a small doubt arises. It is the whisper of consciousness asking, is this really who I am? That is the first stage of awakening, and it begins with the courage to question the illusions of society. Society thrives on unquestioned assumptions. We are trained to believe that wealth equals happiness, that competition is natural, that more possessions mean more worth, and that we must constantly be achieving something to prove our value. Yet when we pause to look deeper, we realize these are not universal truths, but cultural constructs. Questioning them does not mean rejecting life or responsibility. It means recognizing that much of what we chase is shaped by external pressures, rather than inner truth. Alan Watts once remarked that we spend our lives playing roles in a grand performance, forgetting that it is a play. When questioning begins, we start to see the costumes and masks for what they are. This stage is often uncomfortable. Imagine a fish who suddenly becomes aware of the water around it. At first the realization is unsettling, because everything familiar now seems uncertain. The conversations we used to enjoy may start to feel shallow. The goals we pursued may no longer inspire us. Even relationships can feel strained, because we are no longer fully convinced by the script we were given. Many people at this stage feel a sense of alienation, as though they are drifting away from the collective story. But this is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of growth. The shell must crack for the bird to emerge. The questioning of illusions leads to a more profound realization. Much of what we call identity is borrowed. Think of the clothes you wear, the language you speak, the religion you were introduced to, or even the political opinions you hold. Most of these were handed down to you before you even had the ability to think critically. You absorbed them to fit in, to survive, to be accepted. But as awareness deepens, you see that these borrowed layers are not your true essence. Who you are cannot be reduced to nationality, job title, or social status. These are roles you play, but they are not the actor behind the role. In this stage, many experience what can be described as an inner awakening of curiosity. Suddenly, books on philosophy, spirituality, or psychology begin to resonate. Conversations that once felt boring now spark with meaning when they touch on truth. The mind begins to hunger for authenticity. You are no longer satisfied with shallow explanations. You want to know what lies beneath the surface. This is the beauty of questioning. It turns life itself into a field of discovery. However, questioning also has its challenges. It can lead to doubt, skepticism, and even cynicism if one is not careful. When the old structures of belief collapse, the temptation is to believe that nothing has meaning. But Alan Watts often reminded us that the purpose of questioning is not to destroy meaning, but to clear the ground so that real meaning can emerge. It is like cleaning a window so you can finally see the view beyond the glass. The illusions were never the view, they were only the fog blocking it. As this process continues, you start to notice how society's illusions are maintained. You see how advertisements constantly tell you that you are not enough unless you buy something. You see how media shapes fear to control masses. You see how institutions often value obedience over truth. And most importantly, you see how you yourself have been complicit in sustaining these illusions, because it felt safer to follow the crowd than to step into the unknown. But awakening calls for honesty, and honesty demands that you face these uncomfortable truths. This questioning also extends to time. Many of us are conditioned to think life is about preparing for the future. Study now, work hard, save money, and one day you will finally live. But when you question this deeply, you realize that tomorrow is never guaranteed, and that life is only ever lived in the present moment. The endless chase for a future reward keeps us trapped in dissatisfaction today. To awaken is to see that fulfillment cannot be postponed. The illusions of society thrive on delay, but truth is always immediate. The first stage of awakening is therefore like opening your eyes after a long dream. At first the light feels blinding, but slowly, your vision adjusts. You start to see reality not as society paints it, but as it truly is. You realize that the world is not divided into winners and losers, not confined to the rigid boundaries of status and approval. You realize that you are not here merely to fulfill expectations, but to discover who you are beneath them. This questioning does not provide final answers. It provides the soil in which real answers can grow. Once you have the courage to question, you will never again be fully asleep. You may fall back into old habits from time to time, but something within you has shifted. You know there is more to life than what you have been told, and from that knowing, the path of awakening unfolds naturally, one step at a time. Ladies and gentlemen, when a person first begins to awaken, the mind is restless, filled with questions and doubts, searching for meaning in every corner of life. Yet true growth does not come through endless analysis or constant movement. It happens in silence, in those rare moments when we stop running from ourselves and simply observe what is happening within. The second stage of awakening reveals that the deepest transformation arises not from accumulating more knowledge or experiences, but from entering the quiet space of self-observation. Silence, in this sense, is not merely the absence of sound, it is the absence of distraction, the absence of constant mental chatter, the absence of the compulsive need to react. In the modern world, people are overwhelmed by noise, not only the literal noise of traffic and technology, but the inner noise of constant thoughts. We replay conversations in our heads, we worry about the future, we regret the past, and we drown ourselves in endless mental commentary. To grow inwardly, one must learn to step back from this mental storm and become the watcher. Self-observation begins when we notice that our thoughts and emotions are not who we are. Instead of saying, "I am angry," we learn to say, "There is anger within me." Instead of saying, "I am anxious," we say, "There is anxiety passing through." This subtle shift changes everything. It means we are no longer identified with the passing waves of the mind, we are the ocean beneath them. Alan Watts often emphasized that life is a play of forms, and our consciousness is the stage on which all experiences appear and disappear. By observing without judgment, we begin to see that no thought or emotion defines us permanently. They come and go, like clouds passing across the sky, but the sky itself remains untouched. This stage of awakening is often challenging, because silence can be frightening. Many people spend their lives filling every moment with noise, television, music, conversation, social media, not because they love distraction, but because they fear what they might discover in stillness. In silence, the buried fears, the unresolved griefs, the unhealed wounds all begin to surface. At first it feels uncomfortable, even painful, to face them, but this is precisely where growth happens. What we avoid controls us, but what we observe begins to lose its grip. By allowing these hidden parts of ourselves to arise in silence, we give them the space to dissolve. True inner growth cannot be forced. Just as a seed grows not by pulling at its leaves, but by providing the right soil, water, and sunlight, so too does the soul grow naturally, when given the conditions of silence and observation. In silence, we see how our minds chase after approval, how our egos crave recognition, how our fears shape our choices. Instead of judging these patterns, we simply watch them. This act of watching is transformative. It is like shining light into a dark room. The darkness cannot remain once it is fully seen. Another powerful aspect of inner silence is that it reveals the impermanence of everything. When you sit quietly and observe, you notice how quickly emotions change. Anger flares up and disappears. Sadness arrives and fades. Joy arises unexpectedly. We often live as if each emotion will last forever, but silence teaches us that everything is transient. This realization brings freedom. You no longer cling to joy desperately, and you no longer fear pain endlessly, because you know both will pass. This is the wisdom of impermanence, and it can only be discovered in the space of observation. Inner silence also nurtures compassion. When you see your own fears, insecurities and struggles clearly, you begin to understand others more deeply. You realize that everyone is fighting inner battles, often unseen. The person who is rude, may be carrying a burden of pain. The person who is arrogant may be hiding deep insecurity. The person who is cold may be protecting a wounded heart. By observing yourself honestly, you develop patience and kindness toward others. Growth is not only personal, it naturally extends outward into how we relate to the world. This stage also marks the beginning of freedom from reactivity. Ordinarily, we are like puppets pulled by the strings of emotion. Someone insults us, and we immediately feel hurt or angry. A situation goes against our expectations, and we instantly react with frustration. But in silence, a space opens between stimulus and response. You gain the ability to pause, to see what is arising within you before acting on it. This pause is power. It allows you to choose wisdom instead of habit, compassion instead of anger, calmness instead of chaos. The more one practices inner silence and observation, the more life itself begins to feel different. Simple experiences, a breeze, a bird's song, the taste of food become richer, because the mind is no longer clouded by constant noise. You begin to feel present in ways you never did before. Instead of living in memories or future fantasies, you start living in the immediacy of now. This presence is not dull or empty. It is alive, vibrant, and deeply fulfilling. Ultimately, this stage teaches us that awakening is not about becoming something new, but about uncovering what has always been there. Beneath the layers of thought, beneath the turbulence of emotions, there is a stillness that is untouched by time. When you learn to rest in that stillness, life takes on a new dimension. Growth becomes effortless, not because you are adding something, but because you are removing the distractions that kept your true nature hidden. Ladies and gentlemen, inner silence and self-observation are not luxuries. They are essential steps on the path of awakening. Without them, we remain trapped in the endless cycle of reaction and illusion. With them, we begin to see clearly, to grow authentically, and to live with a freedom that no external achievement can provide. And it is in this quiet, watchful space that the seeds of higher consciousness begin to bloom. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest misunderstandings about awakening is the belief that it arrives all at once, like a flash of lightning, that instantly transforms everything forever. Many people imagine that enlightenment is a single moment where confusion vanishes, suffering disappears, and permanent peace begins. But awakening, in truth, is not a single dramatic event. It is a gradual unfolding, like the blossoming of a flower, or the rising of the sun. The third stage teaches us that awakening happens in stages, each step revealing a little more of the truth, each layer preparing us for the next. This understanding is essential because it prevents impatience and discouragement. Too often, people embark on a spiritual journey, expecting immediate transformation. They meditate for a few days, they read a book of wisdom, they attend a retreat, and then they feel disappointed when their minds are still restless, or their emotions still volatile. But just as no tree grows to its full height in a single night, the human soul does not awaken in a single instant. Growth is organic, and it happens through cycles of insight, challenge, and integration. The unfolding of awakening can be compared to peeling an onion. With each layer you remove, you discover deeper truths about yourself and the nature of reality. The first layers are often the thickest: social conditioning, ego identities, cultural illusions. As these layers peel away, you may feel liberated, but the process is not complete. Beneath them lie subtler attachments, hidden fears, and unconscious patterns that only reveal themselves over time. To imagine that one awakening experience removes everything is to underestimate the complexity of the human mind. This gradual unfolding is not a weakness, it is a grace. If the full weight of truth were revealed to us all at once, we might not be ready to handle it. Our identities, carefully built over years, would collapse too suddenly, leaving us disoriented. Instead, awakening respects our capacity. It comes in waves, each wave carrying us a little further, each wave building the strength to receive the next. Just as the body cannot digest a lifetime of food in a single meal, the spirit cannot digest infinite truth in a single moment. An important aspect of this staged unfolding is the cycle of progress and regression. Many people experience moments of clarity, where everything feels illuminated, only to later fall back into old habits of thought and behavior. At first this feels like failure, but in reality, it is part of the process. The insights you once glimpsed may seem to fade, but they remain within you, quietly reshaping the way you live. The fall back into forgetfulness is not a step backward, but an opportunity to integrate the truth more deeply. Each return to awareness becomes steadier, more lasting, until clarity becomes less of a fleeting moment and more of a natural state. Another lesson of this stage is patience. In modern society, we are conditioned to crave instant results. We want quick fixes, fast solutions, immediate gratification, but awakening does not bow to impatience. It demands a slower rhythm, one that teaches humility. The willingness to walk step by step, stage by stage, is itself a form of surrender. It is the recognition that the journey is as important as the destination, and that each stage contains its own wisdom. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly in a rush. It must pass through the cocoon stage, hidden, still, and silent. So too must we trust the invisible work happening within us. What is beautiful about awakening unfolding in stages is that each stage feels complete while you are in it. When you first question the illusions of society, it feels like a great awakening, and in a sense it is. Later, when you discover inner silence, that feels like an even greater awakening, and so it continues, each revelation feeling final, only to be surpassed by deeper clarity. This does not mean the earlier stages were false, it means they were stepping stones, each necessary for the next. Just as a child's first steps are as important as an adult's stride, every stage of awakening carries its own perfection. This staged unfolding also makes awakening relatable. If enlightenment were only possible as an instant transformation, very few people would reach it. But when we understand that it is a gradual path, we see that every small insight, every moment of awareness, every step toward truth, is part of the journey. It becomes less about striving for some distant goal, and more about recognizing the sacredness of the present step. In this way, awakening becomes less intimidating and more accessible to all. Another profound aspect of awakening in stages is that life itself becomes the teacher. Each stage brings challenges that reveal what we still cling to, what illusions we still hold, what fears still govern us. Perhaps one stage teaches us to let go of material attachments. Another teaches us to forgive. Another teaches us to face death without fear. These lessons cannot be rushed, and they cannot be skipped. Life arranges them perfectly, one after the other, until we are ready for the next doorway. Ultimately, the realization that awakening unfolds in stages teaches us to be compassionate with ourselves. We no longer judge ourselves harshly when we stumble or feel lost. We understand that confusion is a stage, doubt is a stage, even despair can be a stage. Nothing is wasted. Every experience contributes to the larger awakening. Just as the seasons of nature move in cycles, so too do the seasons of the soul. Spring does not resent winter, and autumn does not cling to summer. Each season plays its role in the unfolding of life, and each stage plays its role in the unfolding of awakening. Ladies and gentlemen, awakening is not a single doorway, but a series of doorways. Each one opens when the time is right, each one leading us closer to the truth of who we are. To walk through these doorways requires courage, patience, and trust. And as we progress stage by stage, we come to see that awakening is not about reaching a final point, it is about living fully within each stage, embracing its lessons, and allowing the journey itself to be the awakening. Ladies and gentlemen, One of the most profound realizations in the journey of awakening is the discovery that freedom does not lie in separating yourself from life, but in recognizing that you and life are not two different things. From birth we are taught to think of ourselves as isolated individuals, moving through a world that is outside of us. We are told that nature is something we observe, that the universe is something we exist within, and that other people are beings apart from us. This way of seeing creates the illusion of separation. It makes us feel small, vulnerable, and always at risk. But as awakening deepens, this illusion begins to dissolve, and we realize that we are not separate from life, we are life itself expressing in human form. When you see yourself as separate from life, you live in constant conflict, you feel the need to protect yourself, to prove yourself, to compete, and to survive against forces greater than you. The world appears threatening, and existence feels like a struggle. But when you begin to understand that the very air you breathe is life flowing through you, that the blood in your veins is the same energy that moves rivers and stars, something shifts. You no longer see yourself as an outsider looking in. You recognize that you are an inseparable expression of the same reality that gives rise to trees, oceans, and galaxies. Alan Watts often described this realization as waking up from the dream of being a skin-encapsulated ego, and remembering that you are, in truth, the universe itself playing a temporary role. This realization brings a profound sense of freedom, because separation is the root of fear. If you believe you are separate from the world, then everything outside you can harm you. Death becomes terrifying because you see it as the end of you. Suffering becomes unbearable because you feel powerless against it. But when you realize that you and life are not separate, death is no longer an enemy, it is simply the transformation of form. The wave may disappear, but the ocean remains. Likewise, when difficulties arise, you see them not as personal punishments, but as movements of life itself, shaping you in ways you may not immediately understand. This recognition loosens the grip of fear, and allows you to live with a lighter heart. Real freedom also emerges when you see that the ego, the sense of I that feels isolated, is only a construct. It is a collection of memories, roles, and ideas about who you think you are. But beneath this ego lies something vast, something unbounded. When you look deeply, you discover that the awareness watching your thoughts has no boundaries, no edges, no separate identity. It is the same awareness that exists in every being. To realize this is to awaken to unity. You no longer see yourself as a fragment competing with other fragments, you see yourself as part of an indivisible whole. This recognition changes the way you relate to others. When you feel separate, you are easily threatened by people who are different. You may feel envy, anger, or resentment, because you see others as competitors in the same limited game of survival. But when you realize that you and others are not fundamentally different, compassion naturally arises. You see that their joy is your joy, their suffering is your suffering, because beneath the surface, you are the same life expressing in different forms. This is why sages throughout history have taught love and compassion, not as moral rules, but as natural consequences of awakening. When separation dissolves, love is the only response left. To live from this realization is to experience life as a dance. You no longer resist the flow, because you see that the flow is you. Just as a dancer and the dance are inseparable, you and existence cannot be pulled apart. Every breath, every step, every moment becomes an expression of the whole. Even the challenges, the losses, and the pains are part of the dance. Instead of fighting them, you begin to move with them, trusting that they too are expressions of the same universal rhythm. This understanding also transforms how we pursue meaning. When we feel separate, we are always searching for purpose outside ourselves. We chase achievements, possessions, and recognition, hoping they will make us feel whole. But when you realize you are life itself, you no longer need to seek meaning outside, because life is inherently meaningful. The mere fact of being alive, of existing in this moment, is enough. Just as a flower does not need a reason to bloom, and a star does not need a reason to shine, you do not need a reason to exist. Existence itself is the miracle. The freedom that comes from this realization is not about escaping life, but about fully embracing it. You no longer see yourself as a prisoner trying to break free from the world, but as the world itself in human form, experiencing and exploring its own depths. This shift allows you to live with ease. You stop striving to control everything, because you trust the larger flow. You stop resisting change, because you see that change is the essence of life. You stop fearing endings, because you understand that every ending is also a beginning. Ultimately, to realize that you and life are not separate, is to rediscover your true nature. You are not a tiny being lost in an endless universe, you are the universe discovering itself through the eyes of a human being. This is why awakening is often described as remembering, because deep down we already know this truth. It is only buried beneath the illusions of separation, fear, and ego. Once these illusions fall away, what remains is the simple, unshakable awareness that freedom has always been here, waiting to be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, the deepest freedom does not come from escaping life, but from realizing that you are inseparable from it. In this recognition, fear dissolves, compassion arises, and joy flows naturally. Awakening, in its essence, is not about becoming something extraordinary, it is about realizing that you already are the extraordinary expression of life itself. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have walked together through these stages of awakening, it becomes clear that this journey is not about escaping the world, but about seeing it with new eyes. Awakening is not a destination far away, it is a gradual unfolding, a series of realizations that reveal who we truly are beneath the layers of illusion. We begin by questioning what we were taught, we grow through silence and self-observation, we discover that awakening comes in stages, and we arrive at the profound truth that life and self are not separate. The essence of this journey is freedom, freedom from fear, from conditioning, from the illusion of separation. But this freedom is not a withdrawal from life, it is an embrace of it. It allows us to live with clarity, to act with compassion, and to move with the rhythm of existence, instead of against it. Alan Watts reminded us that life is a dance, and when we awaken, we stop resisting the music, and begin to move gracefully with it. So let us remember that awakening is not reserved for sages, philosophers, or mystics. It is the birthright of every human being. It is a path we all will walk, in our own time, in our own way, and the more we open ourselves to it, the more we discover that the answers we seek are not out there somewhere, they are within us, waiting patiently to be seen. Ladies and gentlemen, the stages of awakening invite us to live more fully, to love more deeply, and to realize that the self and the universe are one. May each of us have the courage to walk this path, to embrace its lessons, and to awaken to the truth of who we are.